One day, a FedEx md-11 was taxiing from Meller Airport and was headed to South Tona. It would have to be a free stop route from Meller to South Tona, and I haven't found the third airport yet. Soon the plane was speeding down the runway as it was heading to South Tona. Oops. Sorry. The plane had taken off. The plane would fly from South Tona to Gandervik. Soon the plane was heading to South Tona. Soon the plane was approaching the snowy island, ready to land to deliver some cargo. The plane was now approaching the snowy island with the first part of the flight, where the plane will now land in South Tona, will go back perfect. But what they didn't know was, when they rode to Gandervik, that's when the flight would crash. But of course, the pilots would not know as they were approaching the airport. But soon there was a problem. The plane's engines had turned off and was quickly losing speed. And now they were stalling very quickly. But they landed perfectly on the runway, hoping they would not overrun on the runway. The plane had landed on the runway, had perfectly landed on the runway, and was now taxiing to load up on more cargo. 45 minutes later, the pilot had came back. They were all done loaded up on cargo and was now taxiing back to the runway for another takeoff. The plane had a new schedule that they had to take a free day trip. The first landing would be at the airport they're already at. The second one will be the airport that they will be going to, and the third one will be Tokyo. But what Tokyo would not know was that this md-11 would not make it to Tokyo, because they would crash at the second airport. The plane was speeding down the runway. The runway was almost up. Luckily, the plane pulled up in time just before it overrun. Soon the plane had left the snowy island and was headed to the next closest airport on their flight chart. Soon the md-11 was leveling out after a very strong bank to turn towards their airport. The trip would be pretty far, but the plane had enough fuel to make it. As they were approaching the island, the island was in sight, but the crew could not see a runway. So they decided to wait until they get closer to the airport. They seen some lights on the island, so the runway was up ahead. So they lowered the speed to 75. The gears were deployed way too early. But the pilot and co-pilot didn't mind as they were approaching their next runway. The speed was now at 50, as the plane was now lowering some altitude. I mean, the plane would actually crash at Orange because the runway's bigger. Soon the plane was landing at their next airport. They decided to increase some speed so they don't stall out. So they went back to 75%. But then they went a little bit of a lower speed. The engines had been turned off again somehow. The runway was pretty short. But the md-11 knew that they could make it. They hoped they could. The pilot jumped out and made the plane land. The landing was a bit hard. Soon the pilot only did that so the plane could actually land. Soon he was taxiing towards the fuel tank because they were a bit low on fuel. So they were now headed to the fuel tank to get some fuel. They were now at the fuel tank. They were reloading up on fuel. Soon they were fully refueled, and the plane had also loaded up on more cargo while being refueled. So now the plane was taxiing back to the runway and ready to land at their final airport, Tokyo. The plane had to make a awkward turning, but soon they were sorta lined up on the runway. Now they were lined up on the runway. The pilot put the throttle at full speed ahead. They were speeding down the runway, headed to their final airport, Tokyo. The plane, another close overrun because the two airports they went to, South Tona and Grandvik, were meant for small planes. But they were now heading to Tokyo. Luckily, they had refueled on the one flight. They had refueled, so they had enough fuel to get to Tokyo. Oh. So, because of that little disconnection we accidentally had, the FedEx flight had quickly made a stopover in Perth, just to load up on some more cargo. But they would now be heading to Tokyo. But the plane did not go onto the runway that we usually do in PTFS videos. Instead, they were headed to the other runway at Perth, just to get lined up with Tokyo better. Soon, the plane was now taxiing to the runway. But ever since taking off from Mellor, headed to South Tonia and Grandvik, and making this a quick stopover in Perth for their three airports and their final destination, Tokyo, the plane would tragically crash at Tokyo. And the ATC tower in Tokyo would never expect it. Soon the plane was thundering down runway 29. Everybody watched from Perth's passenger terminal as they watched the humongous md-11 take off. The plane wondered what the crew didn't wonder why they didn't just taxi from the cargo area, but they didn't care, and off they were headed to Tokyo. But here's the part where the plane will crash at Tokyo. This cause the right engine blew up due to an engine strike at the stopover in Perth. So the right engine and the middle engine have both blew up. Soon the plane was quickly headed towards Tokyo for an emergency landing. But because they did a hard landing from Southampton, whatever it says, their nose gear have also broke off after they retracted the gear when they took off from Grandavik. Soon the plane was now approaching Tokyo. They deployed the gears. The pilot realized that their nose gear had failed, so now they were quickly speeding down the road. They were quickly speeding through the sky to quickly get to Tokyo. They were lucky that they had refueled, but they had lost some fuel. So the plane would now have to quickly emergency land in Tokyo. But because they couldn't turn the failed engines off when they would land, but the pilot would not know that they wouldn't be able to turn the failed engines off due to the engine strike. The plane was starting to stall, so they quickly put full power to the engines and start rapidly descending towards their runway. They were about to stall again, so they quickly put a little bit more power to the engines so they could quickly make their emergency landing. But there was a plane on their runway, Iceberg Flight 8243. They didn't see the humongous md-11 coming in. But when they did, oh, damn it. Damn, so close. Well, let's just say the crash happened. I'll show you the crash. Soon the plane was able to dodge the runway, but when they landed, they started to bounce. And they hit their wing, causing them to crash. So I hope you enjoyed this story.